Why, Crusher, it's good to see you.
You're listening to Crush Performance, your weekly source for sport performance and athletic development information. Get the Crush blogs, podcasts, and performance links at crushperformance.com. Now, here he is, the Crusher.
And welcome to Crush Performance, everybody. I am Jeff Kershell, and we're your weekly source for performance information. Hey, if you have any questions, comments, smart remarks, please reach out to us. info@jeffkershell.com is the email. Search us out on all social media. Look at Crush Performance. You can direct message me there. If you have questions about your program or your athletes or your team or your organization, let us know. If we don't have the answer, I can guarantee that we know somebody who does have that answer in our network of people that we've met over the years. And the great thing is we answer every single message we get. So again, reach out, info@jeffkershell.com. Search us out on social media. Just look at Crush Performance. All right, today, listen, I can't tell you how glad I am that you're here. If you've been following the show for the last 20 years, you've probably heard similar discussions to the one we're going to have today. If you're new to the show, this might be one of the most important discussions we can have at this point in time in the sporting landscape, all right? We are going to talk with Dr. Arne Güllich, sports scientist at the University of Kaiserslautern in Germany. He has a background in exercise science, but he is really focused on, with his team of experts, the developmental pathways of athletes. Where do elite athletes come from? And his latest research paper, which is going to be a huge part of today's conversation, recent discoveries on the acquisition of the highest levels of human performance. This is a massive literature review as they tried to figure out what is going on out there. Where do top performers come from? And how can we orchestrate or reorganize our sporting environments to help support athletes who catch fire and want to chase down that dream of elite sport performance, all right? So today, we are going to dive into all the aspects of where these athletes come from, and you might be surprised about some of the findings. If you haven't read the research or if you haven't listened to the show before, I think this could be a very important conversation if you're a parent, if you're a coach, and if you're an athlete. All right. Now, if you're a recruiter, scout in a pro organization, if you're a recruiter for a college, there are very important implications to this conversation today. Because what athletes do we look at? When is it good, or when is it recommended? When is the right time to look at an athlete in terms of their future development? We have talked about this time and time again on the show, but today we're going to crack open some of the hard data and tell you why we say what we do on the show, but also why some of the countries out there are now operating the way they are. The countries that really do look at and respect the science, the sports science. Again, we talked about it just a couple weeks ago. Norway, of course. Denmark is another one. We have these countries that are actually institutionalizing the data. They're making holistic changes to their entire sporting environment because they know, or we know, how it really works right now. And then on the professional side, we're seeing some very cool things coming out of Major League Baseball, who you guys know I am very close to. I'm going into my 21st year of consulting with Major League Baseball. I was a strength coach and performance director for players in the Blue Jays organization before that. And before that, I did my degree at University of Calgary. Got a huge taste for the Olympic international sporting scene there. And over time, things start to clarify. Things start to become crystal clear, especially when we have research that tells us how things really work. It can't be argued now. We have decisive data that tells us how athletes come from. So here's what we're going to be looking at today. Where do elite athletes come from? Are the young prodigies that we see in 12, 13, 14, 15, the athletes that outperform all of their peers in those age groups, what happens to them as they age and check out of the sporting system? Because what we know now is the majority of top performers were late developers through their youth years. I'll say it again, the majority, and it's not even a small majority, it is a massive majority, which gives rise to the question, what are we doing wrong? Now, to be clear, it is not a terrible thing to be a high performer as a young athlete. The problem is the system that you are entering as a top performer is probably letting you down. Okay, and that's what we're going to try to clear up today. And if you are a late developer, I can't imagine how many incredibly great athletes we have lost over the years. I've said it on the show, you've heard me say it before. We are probably destroying more talent than we're creating in the big scheme of sport development. And I think it's absolutely true because of the way we mismanage the development of our athletes over time. I'm not talking about those athletes that get college scholarships or, sign or make a national team or sign a pro contract to play professional sports. Those athletes are pretty set to deal with the demands of elite sport. I'm talking about the athletes that are getting there or have never gotten there. There's a huge opportunity right now in sport to raise the level of human performance overall, and today's conversation is going to be a big part of that. So get set for an incredible conversation as we talk with sports scientist Dr. Arne Güllich. Let's go. Okay. All right, well, we're joined by Dr. Arne Güllich from the University of Kaiserslautern. Dr. Güllich, thanks for joining us today. I'm looking so forward to speaking with you about all your research and your adventures in the world of sports science.
No, thanks to you for having me. It's a great pleasure and honor.
Yeah, well, I've been looking forward to this because I think it was back maybe in the early 2000s, I was reading some of your research and it was in regards to female athletes. Having 3 daughters involved in sport and also working with some elite female athletes on the Olympic stage in professional sports. I just found it interesting, the lack of scientific research on female athletes. Your paper looking at the trends and sort of the practice habits of female athletes as they grow and develop was really interesting to me. And that was, I think, when I first came across your name, and I really appreciate all the work you and your team do there.
Thank you very much. I want to emphasize, we're a team actually. So this has all been wonderful teamwork. Our team is Brooke McNamara. She's a professor of psychology at Purdue. Zach Hambrick is also a professor of psychology at Michigan State. And Michael Barth is a professor of sports economics at the University of Innsbruck in Austria. And I'm based in the southwest of Germany. So we're actually a interdisciplinary international team. And I'm just pleased and happy and so lucky and privileged to have the opportunity to be able to work with so bright minds.
I love that multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary approach. We try to incorporate that in our athlete development, but in the research, I find that's important. And I love that you have somebody that focuses on the economics of sport because, boy, oh boy, I think, would it be fair to say, Arne, if we look at the major influences in sport at the developmental levels, right up to the elite levels, the financial models of this monster are one of the greatest influences I think we're seeing. Is that fair to say?
Not sure, but economics is definitely critical. So any coach, the thinking of any coach is pure economics. So coaches think in terms of resources and outcomes, right? So resources is the athlete's time, the athlete's body, the athlete's health, the athlete's motivation, the athlete's emotions. This is emotionality. This is all resources, right? That we need. And as a coach, you know that resources are limited. So you got to get as much as possible outcome out of a limited amount of resources. So for example, time is limited. You can't continue expanding training ever more. There's some limit to it, right? Time, body, health, and so on. So good coaches think economically.
Yeah.
What is the best? What is the best way to use the time? How do I combine the different exercise or games we're doing within training sessions? How do I combine across the days of a week and so on? This is all pure economics. So yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and then from a bird's eye view, 30,000 foot view, your recent paper that came out in December 2025, recent discoveries on the acquisition of the highest levels of human performance. It was kind of like a literature review, but what a fascinating outcome on this one, looking at sort of where elite performers come from over the lifespan of their development. Fascinating look. And from the economic side, I can't help but think, Dr. Güllich, you know, when we look at the industry of youth sport being a $20, $30 billion sport, how that's influenced sort of that development over time as well. Just incredible things that I think we need to think about as sports scientists, as parents, and as coaches.
Thank you for mentioning that paper. I must admit we are a bit proud of that paper. It doesn't happen every day that as a sports scientist you get a paper published in Science. So what we found interesting, yes, I may admit, so we did find it interesting, is that you find the correspondence in developmental pattern among the world's best performers across very different disciplines, right? So it was world-class athletes. It was the best classical music composers of all times, Nobel laureates in the sciences, chess players, and so on. What does a pole vaulter have in common with a Nobel laureate in chemistry, right? But still we find that same developmental pattern when it's about what distinguishes the highest levels of human capability. Yeah, and if I may come back to economics once again, I like to do so because that's one of our foci. As I said, coaches think in economics, and they also consider the costs and risks on the athlete's hand, right? Costs and risks are opportunity costs, most obviously. So opportunity cost is the lost benefit of foregone activities.
Right.
As a 12-year-old young baseball player, you make a choice. Do I learn French vocabulary tonight for the test tomorrow, or do I go to practice session? If I go to the practice session, my opportunity cost is that I'm going to fail the test tomorrow. If I learn French vocabulary, my opportunity cost is the lost benefit of the training session, and I'm not going to play on Saturday, maybe, right? And coaches think in these terms, right? Risks is most obviously injury risks, but also loss of motivation, loss of enjoyment, emotional fatigue. These are examples of risks. And also something that many people don't think of, it may happen that you just cease to enjoy the discipline you're doing. And if you've ever only done that discipline, you don't have another one to change to. So that's what I'm referring to when I talk about costs and risks, because these are critical to understand the evidence we find.
Yeah, that is a great perspective for athletes, parents, and coaches to understand. And, you know, one of the things I find fascinating about that research paper was sort of the ebb and flow of the early developers, late developers, and then across those disciplines of expertise. That was fascinating. So I kind of was thinking to myself when I'm reading this, you know, I'm looking, okay, look, you have the athletes over here, you got the chess players, you got the culinary artists, you've got the first chair violinists of the Philharmonic Orchestra, but they all tend to have these human traits. So I kind of thought to myself, it's a human thing, perhaps, right? And
we believe so.
Yeah, interesting. And if we can understand and harness that for the long-term benefit of athlete development, I wonder, Dr. Güllich, if we were able to take a study group long-term from youth through that long-term development and kind of fed them into an environment where we understand from science, you know, the tendencies for development, I wonder how much we can actually push the upper end of human performance. I kind of feel we have a ways to go because we're missing so many steps early on. What do you think?
Absolutely. I totally agree. So if I may, let me just summarize the three central points because I think that helps us for the further conversation, right?
Absolutely.
So the first critical finding was that the population of extraordinary early performers and the population of extraordinary adult performers are largely two discrete populations. That means they're not the same people, they're not the same individuals. The two populations only have an overlap of about 10%. And to 90%, these are different persons. And this is critical. First, because it is counter to the widely held assumption that the future top performers will be those who are the best young performers. And we know today, no, this is not true. It's not true in athletics either. And the second news is the good news that for many young people and their parents and maybe their family, this also implies that if you're not among the best of your age at 12, 14, or 16, this does not mean that you cannot be a top performer 10 years later. In the contrary, most of the future top performers are among those who, as young people, are not among the best of their age. Right? The second point was a widely held belief is that the factors that determine youth performance also determine long-term adult performance. The contrary is true. The predictors of short-term junior performance and the predictors of long-term senior performance are not only different, they're opposite. So what facilitates the short-term junior performance actually inhibits or hampers long-term development of exceptional senior performance, right? And the third central finding was that those who later become world-class, be it in science, be it in classical music, be it in chess, be it in athletics, they were characterized by rather gradual early performance development, but then a marked increase in performance improvement around late adolescence to early adulthood. So when it really counts, right? And this was associated with the second factor, which was engagement in various disciplines. And these various disciplines that really drew our interest because it's curious and it's counterintuitive. Why does it make you a better pole vaulter if you did lacrosse as a child? And how does that work? Right? Or equestrian or ballet. So why does doing ballet as a child foster your later baseball performance? It does. But why does it, right? And so it is important to know that on average, the world-class athletes across all Olympic sports, by the way, on average engaged in 2 other sports besides their main sport. So they did not do as many different sports as possible, right? So 2 other sports seems to provide a suitable breadth-depth ratio. It has some breadth, but it also has some depth within those 2 other sports, right? And they did those 2 other sports for 9 years on average. And of those 9 years, they also competed in the other sports for 7 years. And the latter point is critical because if you compete in a different sport, you must have been a member in another sport.
Right.
Right. So this was not about the baseball coach doing some floor gymnastics the last 20 minutes of the session or playing basketball for warm-up. This also happens and it's probably harmless. But what we observe among the world-class athletes was different. They were members in a different sport organization because otherwise they could not have competed in those other sports. And they did so for 7 years. So to wrap up, it was authentic experience in those other sports, in that it was multi-year and it was performance related and it was with specialist coaches from those sports. And
isn't that fascinating? Yeah, yeah, that is a fascinating one, and that is a point that I think often gets overlooked or is not talked about. We look at some of the sporting cultures here in North America, for example, and probably Europe's a little bit different, especially in the football, soccer world, where recruitment is very, very young. But those players, the way I understand it, and in one of your studies, as a matter of fact, you pointed it out, that in the German soccer, the way they played the game as younger players was a little different than just going high performance. But in North America, I'll speak to this. We're seeing the business of sport, the big business of youth development really take over. Take the academies, the high school academies, for example. A player will go in as a volleyball player, for example, into grade 6 or grade 7, and they'll play volleyball with their academies, and then they'll play volleyball with their clubs. Some of the academies pepper in basketball, they pepper in soccer, they pepper in other sports. What you're saying is that peppering might be fine, maybe harmless, but it doesn't have the influence of an integrated, authentic experience competing in another sport. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, that also corresponds to 3 explanatory hypotheses we've been proposing. So the first is the search and match hypothesis. If you have experience, authentic experience, in several disciplines, the chance of finding the best discipline match for you individually is multiplied, right? But apparently only if it's authentic experience. Authentic in that it's multi-year, it's performance-oriented, it's with specialist coaches and peers within those sports. The second one is enhanced learning capital hypothesis. So the different learning experiences you have, different learning tasks, different learning situations, different learning designs, learning methodologies, expand your learning capital for future continued learning in one discipline at a very high level, right? But again, this learning experience apparently should be authentic learning experiences, long-term, performance-oriented. And the third one is a limited risks hypothesis. If you do several sport, risk of burnout is reduced, risk of emotional fatigue is reduced, and especially risk of long-term overuse injuries are being reduced, right? So, and if young people have a better chance of finding the best discipline match for them individually, have enhanced learning capital, and have reduced risks of career hampering factors, they have greater chances of developing exceptional performance.
Oh, you are preaching to the choir, my friend. You are preaching to the choir. I love it. I absolutely love this conversation. So let me ask you this.
Can I just shortly? Excuse me, Jeff.
Yeah.
We can say Jeff and Arne. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. So you were asking me, could we develop many more exceptional performers? Yes, we can. We could. Yeah. Because now as we know better what the developmental patterns are that lead to exceptional human performance, we can also see that, or we can ask the question, are structural conditions corresponding to that pattern? Do the structural conditions facilitate those patterns or that pattern? And the answer is no. Right? So, for example, okay, so first, for 30 or 50 years, this discussion has been an ideological discussion of beliefs and faith. Right? So should we start early, or not? Should we specialize in one discipline early or not? Should we intensify early training or not? So this was a battle of faith, right? And as scientists, our job is to provide the evidence. And I think we are now, we have advanced a step, or if not a jump, because now we have the evidence from all the Olympic sports. The results are consistent across all types of sports, whether artistic gymnastics or triathlon or science or classical music, and so on, right? Or game sports, baseball, basketball, soccer, and so on. We again and again, we find the same pattern. And structural conditions are, first of all, many people believe. Many people believe in prodigies, and the prodigies are those who are the future top performers 20 years later. And today we know most of them are not. Yeah. Whereas most adult top performers were not prodigies, right? Many parents don't know that. Many parents still believe in this deliberate practice ideology and giftedness ideology and so on, right? Next, the media. The media love prodigies. They don't love the unspectacular Michael Jordan case at 15 years who was rejected by his high school's team, no talent, right? This is not interesting for media. Right. Prodigies, right? Who perform internationally on the violin at age 5. That's interesting for media, right? And third, this ideology of early start, early intensification, focus on just one discipline to be able to do professional training in that sport, that's still very widespread among youth coaches as well, right? Okay, so thus far on faith. Next, structural conditions. If you want to make a career as a coach, you typically start with children, then you do adolescents, right? And you're offered more attractive jobs, maybe professional jobs, paid jobs at a higher level if you're successful with the adolescent athletes. If you win something, state championship or something, right? Sure. So that's a strong incentive for youth. Many youth coaches want to get more than just youth coaches, right? So there's a strong incentive of accelerating their players or their athletes in general, selecting the most accelerated and then further accelerate their development. And third, scholarships. Sure. Scholarships, especially in North America, are a strong force. They're an extremely strong incentive for young athletes, but also for stakeholders, their parents, their family, and so on. And for many, it may be the only chance of getting tertiary education at all. Right. So these are structural conditions that facilitate early start, early focus of just one discipline, and early intensification of training to accelerate your early performance. And it works. Your chances of being awarded a scholarship because of your early development is increased if you accelerate your early performance development by that pattern, right? But it's the contrary of the pattern that facilitates long-term world-class performance at an adult age. And that's why many, and that's why so many scholarship awardees flatten in their further development once they're awarded the scholarship. So they have a steep rise in their early years that makes them being awarded or earning the scholarship. But for many of them, the development does not continue as expected, but many of them flatten.
Okay, I feel like you're in Germany, thousands and thousands and thousands of kilometers away. I'm in Northern Canada. I feel like we have a mind meld going on here somehow, because you answered pretty much every question I had regarding these topics. This is fantastic. I've got to back up though, because you mentioned it. Parents not understanding maybe the big picture, or maybe not having access to great research like this. I think with good intentions, it's kind of counterintuitive, as you mentioned earlier. Hey, let's get in there. Let's get an advantage. Let's go pedal to the metal, full tilt into one sport to get an advantage. We know it doesn't work that way. So one of the big questions I had for you, and maybe the entire group, I kind of have my theory about it. But if we have these young prodigies through age 10, 11, 12, maybe even 13, 14, and 15, these young performers that outperform their peers, they're selected for travel teams, they're recruited into academies, they get all the advantages. If they're disappearing, if 90% of that adult high-performing population were the kids who weren't performing there, my question is, what happened to the prodigies? I feel strongly that, one, we've let down those late developers in our current system, but I also feel we've really let down those Prodigy top performers as they move forward as well. What do you think about that that's my thinking right there.
Right. Okay. So first, I don't want to be misunderstood. There's nothing wrong with exhibiting a good performance as a child or adolescent.
Right.
You're a parent. You're a parent. Your girls come home and they made an F in mathematics. You won't tell them, oh, next time rather try to make a D, because you shouldn't be so successful too early. No, we don't do that as parents, do we? And we don't do that with our youth athletes either. The point is how they got to that performance, right? Whether it was with starting playing baseball or basketball or whatever at 6, intensifying training, doing 4 sessions at age 8 already, taking additional private training sessions with a private individual coach, getting on the travel team at age 10, intensifying training to 6 sessions per week, playing 50 games per year, and so on, right? So the question is how you get to that performance. If somebody gets state champion in, say, hurdling, short hurdles, right? And at age 16, and has been doing athletics for 3 years, so starting at 13, and before they did artistic gymnastics from, say, 6 to 10, but as well at 9, they took up tennis and played tennis until 15, and only started athletics at 13 and focused on athletics at age 15, right? Or 14 in this case, right? That's totally different than the state champion who started hurdling at 6 and ever only did hurdling, right? And intensified training and so on. And let me say another word, or let me pick up your point about parents. Most parents want the best for their child.
Absolutely.
Right? And somebody tells them, hey, your child is really fast or strong or great endurance or a good ball control and best development in their team and so on. As a parent, you're tempted to sending them to another high school, a private high school with a better coach, a higher performing team, and you wonder when is the right age to do so, 12, 14 years, and so on, right? And as a parent, you want to do the best for your child, but not all parents are professionals. And not all parents have or are aware of the recent evidence. There's still this belief out there about Prodigy and intensifying specialized training and so on. And they're being told so from many seemingly professionals, right? So the coach from the high school may say, yeah, send me Marvin. I pick him up, I adopt him into my team, and it's time to do so now. Otherwise, it's going to be too late, and he's got to focus on just basketball. So I can do a professional training with him. And as a parent, what can I do? I have to believe what the professional basketball coach is saying, right? And so that's a job. That's our task to spread the recent evidence, right? So such that it's not just a battle of faith anymore, but that we can discuss based on evidence, that parents can make up their mind based on evidence.
Yeah, and Dr. Güllich, listen, I really appreciate what you just said there. I liked how you clarified being a young prodigy, being a young high performer is not a bad thing. Even though, the science is telling us it doesn't work out that way. It's not necessarily that they're top performers. I'm more about maybe how we handle and treat those top performers. Could it be we're letting them down as much as we let down those late performers? Would it be fair to say, if I just observe how elite young athletes, the top performers are coached, they're coached differently. They're maybe not challenged as much. Maybe they do get into one sport early on because, maybe there's family reasons. Maybe there's socioeconomic reasons. Maybe the player just loves that sport. And we just have to make sure as they grow and develop, even as a top performer, we handle it properly. Is that a strong message to send here?
Absolutely. So Michaela Schifrin and Tiger Woods both started their sport at age 2 and ever, not only, but they ever did their sport, and both became world number 1 at 21. And Michaela Schifrin was a skier all the time, and Tiger Woods was a golfer all the time. Although I just learned that Tiger Woods also was on the athletics school team, and he played baseball as well. But he continued doing sport all the time. Right. So these examples also exist. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart also exists. Right. But they're the minority. They're the exception, not the rule. And that's important to understand. And as we do not know in advance which child is the type for whom just focusing on one sport and ever only doing that one sport is the right solution, or whether rather trying out 2 or 3 sports and engaging in those sports for more is the best solution for somebody. We don't know that in advance, right? So that's why we're interested in majority evidence to increase chances. That's the point.
I love it. And also going back to one of your earlier points too, another thing you mentioned that that really struck me was the idea of the sampling and the crossover from different sports as an athlete moves on. The idea of authentic experiences inside of those sports, learning different strategies. I think it comes from the sports as well, but getting exposure to different coaches and coaching styles and different strategies for addressing sport from different coaches is also very important. And that might also lend to that, that really high performance, broad thinking that could drive an athlete into elite performance later in life. Is that fair to say?
So coaches who coach youth athletes who have done several sports, and others who have ever only done that sport, coaches report those who come from other sports are simply the smarter learners. That's what coaches say, and I like that term because that really hits it, right? So that those different learning experiences. Let me illustrate by an example. So we're all different learning types. We all learn differently, right? Can be categorized in a handful of different types of learning. So if you have experienced various different designs and methodologies of learning, so that the gymnastics coach does learning differently than the volleyball coach. Right. Now I have a certain type. I'm a certain learning type, and my chance to understand which learning methodologies are most effective for me individually is just increased to understand the principle that organize which learning type is the most effective for me, if I have experienced a larger variety of learning methodologies, right? Another point is cognitive development. So more variable learning tasks improve our ability to abstract, to recognize complex problem structures, right? So Nobel laureates, right?
Sure.
Yeah, but this also applies to sport. Whether you're a pole vaulter or whether it is about a team game sport, there's complex problems to recognize and to find solutions for. Right, so that's another learning skill we believe is being improved by those different learning experiences. Can I add one more point? So especially for sports, because we talked about scholarships earlier, Jeff. One particularly finding was that when we compare senior world-class athletes with their peers who were also exceptionally good, but just not world-class. So something like national class, for example, right?
Yep.
First-tier league players, but not world-class. The world-class athletes were selected for talent promotion programs almost 3 years older. So talent promotion programs, that's youth sport academies, that's the federation's underage selection teams, underage squads, and so on. Almost 3 years later, 2.7 years on average. That's quite considerable because the range at which programs recruit is typically, say, 10 to 18 years. Right. So within a 8 years range, a 3 years difference is quite considerable. So this tells us they must have developed until an older age just with their home high school or home sport club and in the environment of their family, right? And so we wanted to test that hypothesis with US basketball players. It was a project that was just published last week. It's just 5 days old. Just got out. And so we had the opportunity to interview the best youth basketball players of the US, invitational events. So we asked them about their developmental pattern, participation pattern, basketball.
What age group, Dr. Güllich? What age group is this now? Is this high school or?
Yeah, they were 17 on average when we interviewed them. So it was a standardized questionnaire. And then we followed them up for 5 years and observed who made it to the NBA and who didn't. And they were matched at age 17 on several critical variables. And so we had a sample of matched pairs that we could compare those. Every player who made it to the NBA had a twin that was very similar on critical criteria.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a strong design. Okay. So one of the central points was that those who made it to the NBA compared to those who did not, although they were very similar or equal at age 17 in all other aspects, was that they were less likely to obtain a scholarship. The NBA players were less likely to obtain a scholarship, and they were less likely to relocate somewhere else. So, and this is consistent with the hypothesis that those who made it at the long term just stayed at home longer until older age and stayed with their family until older age.
Wow. What a finding, because what we're seeing in the US, as you know, high school players are now relocating to move to academies, either resident academies or billet family academies. We also see this in junior hockey. And Dr. Güllich, if you look at junior hockey in Canada, in the US, there's this thing called the bantam draft. I think it's one of the huge crimes of developmental sport, by the way. I hate it. They're looking at 15-year-old young players and they're drafting them into a men's type, adult type environment for development. If you look at the number of players who are drafted at 15 that actually make it to the NHL, and understand that these kids move away from home to a different country, different province, very, very few of them have elite success. That is incredible to me. I can't wait to read that study on the basketball. So here's another important conversation for parents.
Yeah, and the point is, this is the message to parents, but also to youth athletes, home coaches, and the youth athletes themselves. There's no use in hurrying.
Right. Take your
time.
time.
There's no use in trying to accelerate things. Rather, okay, for many people, at some point, it is beneficial to change somewhere else, but this should be later rather than younger.
Right.
Right. And so the message is to parents, to youth athletes, and to coaches, wait until it's the right time to make that change.
So in sport, would it be fair to say?
And it should be as young as necessary, but as old as possible at the same time.
Oh,
right.
Hold on. Can I ask you?
The programs. Let me just say
that one more time, Dr. Güllich. Can you say that one more time, please? That is such a strikingly important statement you just made.
As early as necessary, but as old as possible.
So important. So important.
And the programs you're talking about, right? So there are academies. Some of them start recruiting at 10 or 12, right? They produce many more failures than successes. And we're talking about a ratio of 1 to 99-fold, more or less.
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
So 99 failures per one success. But those 99, okay, failure is a strong word, right? It may be that some of those young people may just be enthusiastic about being able to pursue their hobby. And even if they don't get a professional player, all fine, had a good time, or good, and now college or real life or whatever, right? So maybe failure is a strong word, but those who do not make it to become professional players and play National Hockey League or whatever, right? MLB and so on, they have the same costs, and that's the point. They have the same costs and risks as those who do become professional athletes have, and those costs is leaving your home team, your friends, your circle of friends, changing to a new school you have to adapt to. Maybe they have learned different things than you have in the previous years, right? You may have to take private lessons to catch up with your classmates, and more heavily leaving your home as a child or as an adolescent, right? And whatever educator or pedagogue you will be under at the new high school never is your own parents. And
that was my next big question.
There's no better home than your home.
Yeah, that was one of my big points. Yeah, that was one of my big points for you is the importance of that home environment, the mom, the dad, the high school buddies, the school friends that they've had all their lives, brothers and sisters, cousins, the extended family around them. That has to weigh heavily here, and you just mentioned that, so I'm glad you did, because that's a big point for me. These young kids moving away from home. You know, again, intuitively, hey, you're going to leave home for college. So leave home in high school, get a leg up, understand what it's like to live on your own, and then go to college. But it rarely works out that way.
So if we observe data, evidence again, that being involved in talent promotion programs at a particularly young age is negatively correlated with achieving world-class performance at an adult age. This implies that many of those who later become world-class, having joined talent promotion programs at an older age, about 3 years older, they must have had a different environment that must have been quite suitable for their long-term development, if not superior to the environments they have in those talent promotion programs. That would be my logic of conclusion.
Yeah, right. And then that might look very different circumstance to circumstance. And there might not be a single hard line on what that development looks like. It could be very individual as well, I would imagine.
Absolutely, yeah. So everything I'm telling is majority evidence. Most world-class athletes develop that way, but there are exceptions, right? Yeah, and training intensity also is a critical point. So the purpose of those talent identification, talent promotion programs is to select the best youth athletes, believing that they are those who have the best chances of later becoming adult exceptional athletes, and they select them and recruit them for the purpose of some treatment, and that treatment is intensified sport-specific practice, right? Plus competitions, plus competing with likewises, so other youth athletes who are as good as you are, and other teams are competing against other teams, and so on. But now what we find in the data is that on average, those who made it to world class in across all Olympic sports, they accumulated on average 20% less sport-specific training than did their peers who made it to the national level.
That's a big number.
Right? 20% is considerable, right? So to give you a figure, the senior world-class athletes by age 22 had accumulated on average 4,900 training hours, whereas their peers who made it to national class had accumulated more than 6,000 hours. So that's the 20% difference, right? And that's across all ages. So one of the purposes that the talent promotion programs are being done for, to make more professional training, and more professional training implies doing more intensified training, is in contradiction to the evidence.
Wow.
And
wow. Wow.
And there's reason to assume that again has to do with costs and risks.
Right.
So intensifying specialized training increases costs and increases risks at the athlete's hand.
And yet, you know, with everything we know, if we just look at the landscape from youth sport right up to our professional Olympic athletes, injury rates are at historical highs at almost every level of development in our world, in virtually every single sport. So we know there's a huge disconnect here. If we have one initiative, let's keep our athletes healthy. There's some strong messages here, I believe, that will lead us down that path.
Yeah, and another project which is running with the top German youth basketball players. The purpose was to investigate what are the factors of injuries, right? Both acute injuries and overuse, chronic overuse injuries. And the major factor for both is how early you start playing organized basketball and how much basketball you train and play. Whereas the assumed protective effect that has been proposed by another branch of research, we don't find that. So doing the other sports itself is not a factor, is not a protective factor against overuse injuries.
Interesting.
Still there is that effect, but it works differently because those who do other sports typically did less specialized main sport practice, and that's why they're probably the major factor why and how they reduce their risk of later injuries.
Yeah, and that's interesting because if you look at the data and the research the NBA is doing, for example, on youth players and players entering the NBA, look, some of these young players are looking like old, worn-out veteran players from, you know, a few decades ago, and it has a lot to do with the volume. Hey, one other thing, you know, in that note, you got me thinking about your research paper on the German national soccer team and how they went about their training. There's reasons that athletes have to specialize. I came from a family of 4 kids, and it was literally just too much for my parents to have us doing 3 or 4 sports each. So there are reasons athletes have to specialize in the sport. But within that world too, there are opportunities to create all of this wholesome long-term developmental goodness by how you do it. And I thought it was fascinating looking at how those German players went, maybe playing the same sport, but a different version of the sport through youth, maybe less organized street ball as opposed to competitive, hard training, organized academy type settings.
Right. Yeah. So we had 2 soccer samples, world-class male soccer players and world-class female soccer players. That was the Olympic champions, by the way. And the others, many of them were world champions. So winning the FIFA World Cup, right? And the factors that distinguish the world-class players was other sports. For men, it was the most frequent sports were tennis, table tennis, basketball, handball, so European handball, but also athletics and artistic gymnastics. Oh. And for women, it was artistic gymnastics, it was athletics, so track and field, but also table tennis, handball. And okay, that was one factor consistent with all the other Olympic sports. The next factor was informal peer-led play. So playing with friends or family, playing soccer with friends and family without a coach. Mostly right. Even without any adult present, it's just among friends in the schoolyard, in the garden, on the street, in the playground, and so on, right? And so the world-class players, they had more informal play until age 14 than they had organized training sessions. So they had on average by age 14 they had on average 3 training sessions per week. But they played informal soccer 4 times a week, right? And in addition, did twice a week another sport. So that's how their sport biography was composed, so to say. And the third factor was that within their organized soccer training, those who made it to world class had a larger proportion of playing forms and significantly less physical conditioning training.
Ah, interesting. Very interesting. Because the conditioning world right now, it's off the charts for young players, trying to offset this injury or trying to improve the opportunity for in-game performance, especially early on. And especially in the weight room, Dr. Güllich, what a dangerous, dangerous game for parents to play with young athletes.
Not sure. As far as I'm aware of the evidence, and there have been a number of reviews and meta-analysis even. So weightlifting per se is not harmful. It even may be protective if it's well done. I mean, right. I'm talking about your world now, and I can see the picture on your wall behind you. Yes, this young man, I think, is doing it technically fine.
Right. And the introduction, and then I think the problem we see in my world is, everybody feels it's good, but heavy lifting before peak height velocity and the type of training done before they've reached the end of their puberty or their long bone growth. We see a lot of issues there. And again, it goes back to that idea that you said, hey, we need to slow down a little bit. Strength and conditioning, preparation for sport is incredibly important early on, we know, but it needs to be done properly. And we also need to be hyper aware of that long bone growth in puberty. And then afterwards, when these athletes start coming into their adulthood, then we can attack maybe strategic performance. And that's a big piece of the puzzle as well.
There's still time to develop speed, strength, and endurance. There's still time to develop that later. And it's even much easier to develop that once they're, say, 16 or so. Right. So you would have to be doing a lot of work to develop strength at, say, age 11, where it's not even needed. They grow anyway, and their growth is their strength is growing anyway, right? And to really engage in that specifically, there's still time for that later.
Yeah, and then the other thing you mentioned too is just in terms of the time and the cost analysis of this. Hey, that free play takes a physical toll. The organized sport and the practices and the team play takes a physical toll. Now we add in a strength and conditioning program that's not in sync or not balanced with the exertion or the cost of the free play or the training. Now we get off balance. And I do believe that's one of the biggest reasons for the rising injury rates in developmental sport is just that loss of balance, perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps. And maybe also this increasing force of incentives of scholarships, academies, and so on. Right. I've learned that there is a public national ranking of 8-year-old basketball players.
There is.
Isn't that insane?
It's crazy. It's crazy. And hey, I can't help. I love the Olympics. So I watch the Olympics summer and winter with fascination. Norway fascinates me. And it fascinates everybody I know. But, with that population, what they do in the Winter Olympics, there is a method to that madness there. And it's quite telling when you dive into how they go about their youth development. That's a macro decision-making system there that I think we can all learn from.
And recently, they're similarly successful in summer sports as well. Olympic champions in beach volleyball, the 400 hurdles. So these are some particularly prominent examples, but there are many more. They're winning medals even in the summer sports. Handball, Olympic champion in handball.
And I have to believe, Dr. Güllich, and I know they're respecting a lot of this research and the importance of this research, especially when it comes to youth development and long-term athlete development. Dr. Güllich, oh my goodness, what a fantastic, and I'm telling you, very important conversation here today. I have to thank you one more time. So our audience, we have professional GMs, assistant GMs. We have coaches from sports, high schools, colleges, academies. We have a strong audience of parents and athletes that listen to the show all over the world. closing remarks from you. And I'm going to, hey, now that we've got this connection, I'm going to be connecting with you as your research grows and develops. But based on where we're at right now, with your recent research and everything that we know, any kind of final message to the sporting world out there from your perspective and the data that's coming from the research?
Wow. Yeah, so my message would be listen to Jeff and listen to the evidence.
Okay, words of wisdom. Great words of wisdom there. I like the idea of take it slow and, look at the data.
Let me say, so I do want to say one last remark. We have to be aware these are all the people we're talking about are very extraordinary personalities, right? So they're not just normal as you and I are, and are just a bit more of that. No, these are very extraordinary, qualitatively different personalities, and to get there, it takes a long time to mature. And trying to hurry it, to pressure it, accelerate it is not the way. Yeah, we've understood that. Hey, I want to say thank you, Jeff. It's been a really huge honor and a great pleasure to chat with you. And being on a show of such a rock star is fantastic for me. Thank you very much.
Well, no, it is our honor. And I was looking so forward to this. And I think that you cracked open the Pandora box of questions here. So I'm really looking forward to continuing the dialogue. We'll be watching your research and your group. And please thank your entire group for us, because these are the conversations I believe that will help recalibrate our thinking in terms of human development inside and outside of sport.
Thank you very much.
Okay, how important is that conversation right there? There are so many things that we can go back, revisit, and discuss that need to be discussed. But the overlying theme of course correcting the developmental pathways, not just in sport. He talked about his research, looking at musicians, chefs, chess players from all different walks of life. It's a human thing. Sport just happens to be our world, and sport's also very measurable, which is great. But we definitely, based on the data, have an opportunity to make a massive course correction for the better here, if we listen. This is a huge conversation for parents, for coaches, for organizations, for professional sport as well. The work that Dr. Güllich and his team are doing in the NBA, for example, is going to be groundbreaking, much like our conversations early on this year about Major League Baseball and the MLB report on pitcher injuries and the MLB announcement of the first ever amateur recovery period where pro scouts teams cannot assess, look at, or even talk to youth players from October to January to give them a break from the scrutiny of tryouts and showcases and the stress of being at a level of high performance year round. Such a brilliant move by Major League Baseball. Who is going to listen though? All right. I think this conversation with Dr. Güllich really just reinforces how important that is across the board. Some really important things to consider here. Multiple sports, but not just playing multiple sports. This idea of authentic sport experiences alongside of 2, maybe 3 other sports. And that's a commitment of 7 years or more they found in their research. That's a very interesting concept and one that's not very commonly talked about in the sporting world. We see organizations right now and some of the good academies and travel teams and year-round sporting programs, they do pepper in other sports. We have academies that, baseball academies that work in volleyball and basketball and some other sports in their off season. We have hockey academies that do the same. They get their hockey players trying to do other sports peppered in here or there. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But in order for a second or third sport to really, really influence sport outcomes in the main sport an athlete eventually chooses to enter, there needs to be authentic, competitive participation. That is a very, very important concept. And I think that's something we need to talk about more. And again, that kind of goes to this idea of specialization. Is it good to specialize? Now, we need to be clear here. There are reasons, as I mentioned, that athletes need to specialize. And again, I came from a family of 4 kids. It was impossible for all of us to play multiple sports. Like logistically just wasn't possible. And plus the cost of sport was almost overwhelming, right? So we had to choose our battles, so we were encouraged to play sports, but we had to pick 1, maybe 2 only, and they were seasonal. And me and my brother, we had to play the same sports to make it easier for mom and dad to get us there until we drove. But by the time we got to the age where we're driving, we kind of honed in on the sports that we loved, right? So important. But the idea that being involved in a second or third sport for a long period of time actually changes the framework of our understanding and our learning in this sport we'll eventually choose to participate in. That is a great concept. It goes back to that conversation we had with Kevin Tyler of Altus a while back when we asked him about specialization. And he mentioned something that was actually very interesting as well. He said, not only do you get exposure to other sports, which helps build a well-rounded athlete, getting exposure to different coaches, how they think, how they coach, how they use tactics, how they train, how they address the sport is as valuable as playing another sport. And I think Dr. Güllich mentions that as well in terms of, helping build well-rounded athletes that can handle and understand and learn at the higher levels of sport. Now, also being said, the economy of sport, not just the money side, which is kind of what I was talking early on. Dr. Güllich took a very interesting approach to that. He's talking about the cost, the coaches, analyzing the cost versus reward in terms of effort, time, and the type of training they're doing. Same principle for the athletes. There's a cost involved. And something that Dr. Güllich said that was interesting to me is, 1 in 99% of the elite athletes will fail to become, world-class performers. 1 out of 99, I think is the number he said. And, whether that's, the exact number for your sport, I'm not sure, but you get the general idea. And the interesting thought there was the athletes that didn't make it had pretty much the same cost as the athletes that eventually did break through. Right? And that's kind of an important conversation to have. These athletes that actually, decide to eventually enter the high performance pathway in sport, okay, they are special individuals. And you have heard me say that on this show time and time and time again. They are special. They've made themselves special. What they're able to do, the ability to focus on one thing eventually and just become a master at the craft, right? There is expertise. And then there's mastery, right? I was good at a number of sports, but I just don't have the personality to lock in and commit to one thing to take me to the next level. So I'm good at a lot of sports, but I'm not great at anything. And I see so many athletes like that, which serves me well in my profession because, I work with athletes from all kinds of sports and I have a great understanding. They're applying the science to what they're experiencing. But I have so much respect for those athletes that decided to take that sport, the Olympic athletes, cross-country skiing, swimming, biathlon, the X Games type athletes with the big air and the mogul skiers and whatever, the alpine skiers, the summer athletes, the sprinters, 100 meters. That's my job. It's run from point A to point B as fast as humanly possible. My entire life is dedicated to that. That is a special thing. And then balancing and working and pushing performance year after year after year, that is a special thing. To get there, however, the system is corrupt. The system is broken. And there's an opportunity for anybody listening out there who wants to help their athletes eventually chase down a dream. Here's the other crazy thing. A lot of the athletes who aren't successful through 12, 13, 14, 15, even 16 years of age, they're not showing, they're not playing in the top ranks of their peers in whatever sport they're playing. Those athletes might not even have aspirations of chasing down a dream in sport. I can't help but think how many great athletes we've lost because our system isn't set up for success. Circa Norway. Circa Denmark. No national championships up to age of 12. No athlete rankings until age 13. There is no pressure on any athlete in those countries until they decide, hey, I love that sport. Let's go for it. And then what happens? When an athlete shows aptitude and interest, boom, the world of sports science comes in and helps them see how far they can go. That is a dream machine right there, and it's tangible and doable for anybody, anywhere who understands the principles. Such a great conversation today. What an epic episode of Crush Performance. Please share this with every parent you know. Share this with every coach you know. Athletes, share this with your teammates and your buddies, because this is what it's all about. This is where sport's going. It's just a matter of who's going to be on that wave, right? And it's happening right now. So I have to thank Dr. Güllich for joining us today. I want to thank you guys for joining us, because this is how we're going to move forward and create coachable players who love and compete in the world of sport. All right, we'll talk to you next time. Have a great week, everybody.
Find out what it takes to be a top performer. Get the Crush blog, podcast, and newsletter at crushperformance.com.
Goodbye now. Don't forget to ride.